Okay. All right, I'm going to end our poll there and share out the results. So it looks like for most people, a key champion is in the surgeon role, and another in anesthesiology or CRNA. I'm excited to see that that's not the only stakeholder that people are calling out as a key important champion, but I am curious for the 5 folks who mentioned other. Would anyone be willing to come off mic and kind of give a little bit more context about who that person is that's driving those efforts?
This is Kelly Bourne. It's our PAT department, which they roll up to anesthesia. But they're the ones doing the protocol.
Yeah, okay. That's helpful, thank you.
This is Jenny Kinder. I would say the same, our procedure testing, we got those nurses involved and they had some hurdles, but got anesthesia support, and that was key to our success.
I think that's a really great point because we have heard from some previous work groups difficulty in engaging anesthesia, and so hearing how that approach worked for you, kind of going through the nurses, might be a good nugget for others on the call who are having difficulty getting buy-in from that group. Anyone else want to speak to the other? Okay, moving on. I love the split as well. This group has a pretty big mix of where folks are at. There's some 30% haven't started an initiative yet. And so I think, especially for those folks in the room, leveraging these ideas that are on the Jamboard will hopefully be really useful as you put your ducks in a row and figure out how to take on this task. It looks like there's also quite a few people who already have some testing protocols and people referring to decision trees on the Jamboard. We'll get into that, but I'd love if some folks are willing to share what those look like so that the rest of the collaborative can see them. And congratulations to the quarter of you that have already seen decreases in your rates. So that's really exciting. And then finally, the mix of who's ordering tests, surgeons, anesthesia. It looks like it's pretty even split. Again, there's 5 others. I wonder if someone could speak to who those folks are, who's ordering the tests.
So this is Darla Keith from Lake Huron Medical Center. We're a smaller hospital, so we just mainly have two surgeons, and they weren't ordering preoperative blood draws. They would always mark off on their boarding slip as a none. It was the policy right in the outpatient services that had it in there to obtain the blood draws preoperatively on these elective surgeries. So that's where we found ours. It was an OPS.
Thank you, Darla, for that. Anyone else have any interesting findings when they started this work about who was doing the ordering? All right, I'll stop the poll for now, but thanks again for filling that out. I think that's really helpful for understanding kind of who's in the room and who might be using this information. So Christy, can you share the Jamboard again? I'm just going to highlight a few things that I was seeing as the group was working. So for this first scenario, surgeons and anesthesia not having kind of a shared protocol, there was obviously a big theme about just opening lines of communication, having meetings with key stakeholders, dedicating time to having discussions about those things, collaborative meetings. I also noticed a theme around having kind of a decision tree, and a couple people used those words exactly. I wonder if the 3 folks who created these stickies wouldn't mind expanding on kind of who developed that decision tree, whether it came from, a draft form from someone else, or whether you developed it from scratch, what that looked like, and if you'd be willing to share the tree, have the tree shared with the group afterwards in a follow-up email.
This is Jenny Kinder again from Assumption St. Mary's. I credit MSQC with bringing forth the tools, and maybe the tool actually came from the collaboration with MVC and MSQC. But we had a tool template and we altered it a little bit, but we had a great template to start with and we simplified it. So we didn't, it's not our brainchild. It was given to us.
The decision aid, thing. Yeah, we can share that, Christy. If you have the workup tab open, can we toggle over to that? Can you click decision aid at the top? Was it this?
Yeah, that was it. And we simplified it just a little bit and it worked.
So we'll be sure to share this around again with the full group in our follow-up email. This decision aid, and then if you scroll down a little bit further, there's also a testing chart. Both are downloadable for in an editable file format so that you can, like she said, make changes, modifications based on your site's policies and interests. So I'm glad to hear that this has been a useful starting point for people. We'll continue to promote it and push it out to support others. The other thing I wanted to call out, I mean, we kind of got to this a little bit in the poll. Can you go back to the Jamboard, Christy? Around the key stakeholder meetings, it kind of came out of the poll questions a little bit, but beyond surgeon and anesthesia, who have people found to be really critical people to invite to those meetings to make them effective?
This is Amy from Hurley. We haven't had one of our meetings yet, and we're just new to this project, but so far one of the key people that I've been able to engage that's been helpful is the nurse manager for the ambulatory clinic and our pre-admission testing. I'm hoping that it'll be super helpful because she's one of the individuals that starts one of the processes for testing. I know there can be individuals like PCPs and outside of that are also doing testing, but I'm hoping that she can be useful in helping me understand the process of getting the tests and then going from there to see how we can decrease some of the testing we're doing. Because she did provide us with our current protocol right now, and it looks like regardless of comorbidity, every gallbladder surgery that's being done is getting a CBC and a type and screen, regardless of any other factors. So I'm sure that's driving our rate up significantly. Yeah,
those CBC panels are typically the most frequently ordered, especially as like kind of an across the board measure for sure. So yeah, I hope that person proves to be a great ally. I see someone has entered into the chat as well. The pre-procedure testing department nurses were key stakeholders as they collaborate pretty closely with anesthesia.
And that was the same for us at Monroe. They were really the good springboard for that, making sure that when I brought everything in front of anesthesia and the surgeon team, that I actually had all the current information, because I wanted to make sure that when I got to that point where I was in front of all of those people, that I already had a bunch of background work. So they were really, really helpful, the pre-anesthesia testing nurses.
Yeah. Just in the interest of time, I want to highlight something on a couple things on the next scenario as well. For scenario 2 was for those folks that are sort of just getting started, how to decide where to begin. What's a couple of ways that you could think about prioritizing. And there was a lot of different ideas here. I did not try to chunk them into categories because I felt like I didn't have enough time to do it in an intelligent way, but a few things that I noticed were obviously collecting good baseline data to get a sense of what's happening, either by, the types of patients that you have, or the types of procedures that you're doing, or the types of tests. Those are all different ways that you could sort of approach it. And then I know that there's a few added here on the bottom around looking at who's doing the bulk of the ordering. I think that's another smart strategy. We've heard people mention that, you know, if you're trying to reduce your overall testing rate, a smart place to start might be with the providers that order the most, because they are responsible for the majority of your tests. So that might lead you down some holes that you didn't know that you might need to explore. And I think one of those is the primary care physician piece. We've had people sort of discover through this process that it's not the surgeon ordering it or anesthesia, it's actually their primary care provider. And that's a different approach of how to deal with that. So I will do some works kind of chunking these after the meeting so that when we send, and we will share these Jamboard ideas out with the group. I'll start to chunk these a little bit so that they're organized for you. But again, thank you for so many amazing ideas around this for those dozen folks that are in that early stage. And then on the third scenario, I will talk about a little bit. Your hospital surgeons and anesthesiologists have agreed on a protocol, but this is the primary care piece. So this has come up with the reason we added this question is we've heard this multiple times in other work groups. So I just wanted to call special attention to it and ask if anyone wants to share a little bit about the sticky that they added here or something that was very successful in approaching this problem. In particular, whoever wrote this sticky here, or
from Cornwall East. That was the sharing data and reports. That was you. Do you have any other comments about that?
I don't. I just think that it's probably it's a good practice for us to probably follow. We haven't worked on it, so that's like a thought as to how we can navigate through this is to engage the PCPs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anyone on the call has actually done this and what response they've gotten from them.
I have had a meeting with some PCPs and their response was, oh, well, we would be happy to let the surgeons and anesthesia take care of this. We just thought it was our job, like we thought it was our role. And so I think one thing that I'd like to focus on this year with our hospital system is how do we get out some kind of flyer that says, hey, if your patient's considering surgery, this is how you can help the team, which is like the making sure they have good nutrition and, all of the other smoking cessation stuff and take them out of the mix of the labs. That's what I'm hoping to move forward toward this year, but I feel like it's a really big project.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see a question in the chat. If anyone has a response about the best way you found to connect with those PCPs, especially if you're at a large hospital, if you wouldn't mind adding that response into the chat, that would be wonderful. I'm actually going to switch to our updates for now. Again, I'll send out all these ideas after the fact, but just in the interest of time, I want to make sure that this group has those updates from our team. So I'm going to be sharing my screen for that.
I see your notes view of it.
It. Okay.
You want me to go ahead and pull it up, Jana?
This is not my favorite thing to do. Let's just
Let me go ahead. I can pull
Okay.
it up. Yep. Okay.
Can you tell that I'm not normally the MVC staffer who leads work groups? Thank you, Christy, for your expertise. I appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. Hold on 1 second. Just let me know when to advance, okay?
Yep. Okay, so the the 3 areas we're going to be covering quickly are updates about MVC's pre-op testing reporting and data, updates about the R01 grant that we are collaborating on with a few other teams, and then just giving everyone a sense of where all the sites on this call fall within the various P4P and grant programs. So go ahead, Christy. So our MVC team launched a new strategy recently, and as part of that process, we had sort of an internal review of the reporting that we were planning to do in 2024, where our priorities were, where we could consolidate, things like that. So those preoperative testing push reports that everyone's sort of used to getting by like 2 a year with the Blue Cross data, those will be changing this year. So rather than having a standalone push report, pre-op testing will now be rolled into a much larger report that has sort of the greatest hits from the pre-op testing report will go into a dedicated pre-op testing page. So folks will still receive this information. We'll be sharing those pages with MSQC as well, but just so that you know, there will be kind of 1 point of data reporting for pre-op testing, and it will be 1 page instead of 3. In addition to that, MVC is developing some additional sort of interactive registry pages focused on pre-op testing that will be available, I would guess in the fall, is what I've heard from our data manager. If you don't currently have access to the MVC registry, we're happy to support you in getting that access. But essentially they kind of operate like, you know, almost like a dashboard type page where you'd be able to log in, see the most up-to-date data at any point that you log in, and kind of apply your own filters and do various other things. So that's in the works. And then we also have made some changes to our definition, which I will, if you can go to the next slide, Christy, I'll turn it over to Brad to describe what those changes are and kind of why they were put in place.
Thanks. So yeah, you can see here, I've separated out our previous definition, which you all were hopefully familiar with for a while, and the updated definition at the bottom. So just to summarize the previous definition, our cohort consists of MVC defined cholecystectomy, inguinal hernia repair, and lumpectomy episodes. And previously these were limited to particular CPT codes. And this was really to get at the lowest possible risk surgeries that we could find in our data. And for chole and hernia repair, those include laparoscopic episodes, and lumpectomy. I don't remember exactly what that CPT code is, but the updated definition now does not require the laparoscopic requirement for hernia repair, and we do not limit the CPT code for lumpectomy. So this will add significantly increased case counts to our surgery cohort while also achieving this low risk cohort. And then we also did keep the laparoscopic requirement for cholecystectomy, but added 1 CPT code that was also a laparoscopic CPT code. These were discussed internally and primarily with our director and surgeon Hari Nathan and collaborator Leslie Dossett. So there was great intention here to keep to expand the cohort while also achieving a low risk surgery group. So just wanted to summarize that for anyone here. And I think maybe if anyone has any questions about this, please reach out or post any questions in the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. And I think one of the takeaways here for sure for folks is that as you see your next batch of reports or you see the data on the registry, that this will explain some of the increases in case counts that you see or some of the changes that you see, that the definition is a little bit different. I don't believe it's identical to MSQC's definition, but I think it's slightly closer.
It's not. The part of that was also the goal is to get close to MSQC. And just wanted to point out as well that these changes will be reflected in the P4P program. So we'll also see increased case counts there and more opportunity to make change.
Thank you, Brad. All right, next slide, Christy. So the grant has been mentioned by a few folks on the call so far, but Leslie Dossett and Hari Nathan are the co-PIs on a funded research grant. It's 5 years. We've the sort of collaborators on that include ourselves, MSQC and MProve. We have already kicked off kind of recruitment for that. We've identified 3 sites that will be part of the initial pilot phase, which will involve, you know, putting in place an intervention, some additional quality improvement support from our grant team, and the de-implementation kind of experts from the MProve team. There's a second rollout that will happen towards the end of this year, where we'll be looking to add an additional 12 to 15 sites. So I think this cohort is an ideal proving ground for identifying some of those additional resources and putting those in place. But additional information on that will come later this year. And there's also going to be quarterly advisory board meetings. So some of the folks on this call might have representatives on that board who aren't in the pilot, and kind of vice versa. Go ahead to the next slide. The idea behind the pilot, the grant, was to kind of expand out an intervention that was tested at Michigan Medicine a couple years ago. It sort of followed this map of different interventions, so multi-level interventions. Obviously, there's a few different things here, having a shared protocol, having opportunities for provider education. I believe the main sort of mechanism there was that they had sort of champions, surgeon and anesthesia champions who would make presentations at grand rounds and have updates about things there. And obviously some regular data feedback and auditing, and integration into EHR and P4P. So there's a lot of different aspects that went into this program at Michigan Medicine, but the idea now is to adapt it to other locations, knowing that Michigan Medicine is a unique place that doesn't have the same processes that a lot of the other hospitals in the state do. So the idea here is to make something that's customized to the different sites across the state. Can you go ahead to the next slide? That Michigan Medicine pilot did see some really positive results. They've noticed, you know, even surgeon by surgeon, significant decreases in testing rates for the majority of the surgeons that participated in the pilot, and that overall those testing rates also decreased on average. Go ahead to the next slide. So this is just some of that preliminary data that they had from the Michigan Medicine pilot, but the proportion of patients who received that testing decreased after the intervention by, you know, obviously statistically significant amounts, but from 29% to 12%. So nothing to, you know, kind of cough at. And then if we go to the next slide as well, just to give you a sense of kind of who's involved in these various things. So Ascension St. Mary, ProMedica Hickman, and Sparrow Hospital are those initial 3 sites. I've also added on here which sites are currently doing the P4P value metric with MVC for program years 2024 to 2025, and also the current sites at MSQC for 2024. If I happen to know that you were doing MSQC's program last year, but you're not doing it this year, I've added that. I recognize that there's a couple other folks on here that might have done it, might qualify for that, but I just didn't remember. So I noticed that we have a lot of representation here in the room, which is wonderful. Again, I hope that this group continues to be a valuable resource as a series going forward, where you all get to share how things are going and you can kind of drive the agendas. So I would also ask, just in closing out the work group, Christy will shift to some final slides, but if you could also think about adding some information into the chat about what you would like to see agenda-wise for future work groups, that would be really helpful for us. So go ahead, Christy.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, in the interest of time, I know it's 1 o'clock. We won't do any questions, but if you have any questions, just please feel free to email us about anything that we went over today. Like Jana mentioned, we will be sharing all the resources that we discussed today, and the recording as well. Before we close out, I just want to go over some dates for the remainder of the preoperative testing work groups in this series, as well as some upcoming work groups. So as a reminder, if you're aiming to get full points for the preoperative testing work group series, you do need to attend all 4 individual work groups in the series. This is the first work group of the series, and then the remaining 3 in the series are on May 14th, August 6th, and November 5th. So save the date for those. Please make sure that you register for them as well to get that direct Zoom meeting link. In terms of upcoming work groups, we are closing out February's work groups with a cardiac rehabilitation work group on February 22nd. And then our first work group in March will be a post-discharge follow-up work group on March 12th. As a reminder, all work groups in 2024 are occurring from 12 to 1 p.m. So with all that being said, thank you so much, everyone, for coming today and participating. Thank you, Jana, for leading that discussion. As I mentioned, the post-work group survey was posted in the chat by Jessica. I also will be including it in a follow-up email. As a reminder, if you are aiming to get credit for this work group as a participating hospital in MVC's component of the P4P program, please make sure that you fill out that work group survey. Thank you so much again for attending, and we hope to see you at future work groups.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.